All right, everybody, welcome back to the #1 television program in the history of the entire universe. I am BrianLeeDurfee, author of The Forgetting Moon, The Blackest Heart, and The Lonesome Crown, all three books published by Simon & Schuster's Saga Press. Today I'm going to be reviewing, we're going to be doing an in-depth book discussion of Stephen King's The Green Mile. Now I have done a spoiler-free book review of this book. All you need to do, like if you know nothing of the story yet, not watched the movie, not read the book, but you want to watch my spoiler-free book review, just type in The Green Mile and my last name Durfee, and that book review will magically appear upon your television screen. Type those things into your YouTube search bar. Some sorcery works and it just shows up on your phone or computer or whatever. Trust me. Anyway, this will be a spoiler-filled discussion of The Green Mile, where we get into the details of the book, the ending of the book, the way the book is plotted, the different characters, and all the different things that I took notes on as I was rereading this book just recently. So we will set this here, and we will get busy with the book discussion. The book came out in 1996. It was a serialized novel. It came out in 6 parts. And then once all of the parts had come out, they put it into a big, of course, novel like this. When people ask me, who've never read Stephen King before, Durfee, what Stephen King book should I start with? I always tell them The Green Mile. I just think it's the most accessible Stephen King novel. It's almost a perfect novel. I mean, there's only a handful of novels in the world that I wished I had written myself. This is one of them. It's just word for word perfect. The plot's perfect. The story's perfect. The characters are perfect. It's just perfect. Now, if they're like, well, I've seen the movie, I want to read like a Stephen King horror book, then I'm kind of like, well, Needful Things is a pretty good place to start. That's pretty basic Stephen King horror. But anyway, I just thought I'd tell you, I always recommend this one to people. Anyway, I just read this. It took me an afternoon to read. It's only like 400 pages. Read it pretty quick, and then that night I watched the movie. Isn't it shocking how if you just filmed the book, the movie will be excellent? And that's what they did. The movie was nearly spot on with the book. They didn't take hardly anything out of the... They didn't change anything, really. I mean, it was just like almost paced the same, word for word. I mean, everything was the same. Pretty much everything was the same. It was a great job, a great adaptation. Probably one of the best, most accurate adaptations of a Stephen King book to a movie. Fantastic, starring Tom Hanks, a whole host of other great actors and actresses. Anyway, the book starts out in 1932 at the Cold Mountain Penitentiary in, I believe, Louisiana. At least that's what was on all the trucks in the movie. Anyway, now Paul Edgecombe is our narrator. He is narrating the book as a 104-year-old man living in a rest home somewhere, and he's thinking back about the events that took place in 1932 in Cold Mountain Penitentiary when he was a prison guard specifically assigned to the death row inmates. Now, the book starts out with just great descriptions of the prison itself, E block where they keep the death row inmates, the 6 cells that are there along the corridor, the green floor that they call the Green Mile. It's got a lime green floor that is in the corridor there, and it's 3 cells on each side of the corridor. He does a great job of describing Old Sparky, the electric chair that they use to execute everybody, how the electric chair works, how the convicts and the guards get along, how they interact, how the whole dynamic between them. It's just an absolute spot-on description of prison guarding and inmating. How do I know this? Well, if you followed my channel for any length of time, you know that I've worked I've worked at the Utah State Prison for a long time, 16, 17 years. I know what a prison is like. I know what it's like to interact with inmates and felons and criminals, and I know what it's like to interact with other officers. And I know what it's like just to be in prison environment, dealing with all of the stresses and drama that come with it. Stephen King nails it. He nails it. That's why this is one of the books I wish I had written. Once in a while, I want to write a great prison story, but Stephen King's already done it. Anyway, one of the things I wanted to show you, you might have noticed in the thumbnail there was a mugshot of Stephen King. Okay, so the Utah State Prison recently was demolished. It was bulldozed. Old prison. Looked a lot like the prison in the Green Mile. Well, they bulldozed it and built a new prison. Well, I worked for most of my career at the old prison. And as we were cleaning it out, I found that mugshot in a desk. And I think there were many copies made. Now, was Stephen King ever convicted of felonies in Utah? Yeah. He was guilty of, selling some dope ass stories, some dope horror novels. Okay, anyway, I'll stop. He was not convicted of anything. However, he did visit the Utah State Prison in 1993 whilst they were filming the original version of The Stand, the original old miniseries. They filmed all the prison scenes in that miniseries were filmed in the Utah State Prison. Stephen King visited the prison, and I have a feeling that the guards and Stephen King got together and shot that little mug shot as sort of a whatever. And there was a lot of other mug shots that I found of actors that had filmed stuff in the old Utah State Prison. Alan Alda, Kiefer Sutherland, a whole bunch of them I found. Anyway, I've later found out that I'm not the only person that found that stuff, because a lot of it, I guess those photos were circulated a lot, and so there's many copies that officers have gotten. Anyway, I just thought it would be cool, and I will put that mugshot up some point in time while I'm talking to this. I will try to edit a video, which I'm a masterful video editor. And I will try to edit that mugshot somewhere here on the screen as I'm talking about that. We'll see if it happened. I don't know if it will. Anyway, the Green Mile. John Coffey shows up on the Green Mile. 6'8", 350 pounds. Just a big, huge brute of a guy. He's on the Green Mile with a death sentence for the brutalization and murder of the Dietrich twins. And this is where we get to meet one of our main characters. He's a big man. He meets our other characters, the other guards, Dean Stanton. There's Harry True. I can't remember what his last name. Harry. There's Dean Stanton, Harry, Brutus Howell, and of course, the big jerk, Percy Wetmore. And we'll get into a little bit of that. So this big man arrives on the unit, and they put him in his cell. And one of the first things out of his mouth is, is there a night light in this place? Or are you going to turn the lights on? Are you going to keep the lights on? Because I'm scared of the dark. And of course, the prison guards are like, how is this huge man scared of the dark? This doesn't, great character building moment. And I'm telling you right now, my experience in the prison is some of the bigger guys do, the biggest guy I've ever seen at the Utah State Prison was frightened to be there. Let's just say that. That's all I'm going to say. And some of the bigger guys do have a target on them because they're big. And if you beat down a big guy, your street cred in the prison goes up. Anyway. Percy Wetmore, the jerk prison guard. That's another thing that's very accurate. Most of the prison guards I work with are absolute fantastic. They de-escalate situations. They know how to treat the inmates like humans. They are just like the Tom Hanks character and the other characters. Once in a while, you get a Percy Wetmore that just socially awkward, does not know how to treat inmates right, actually is just rude and crude and just a big jerk to everybody, including the fellow officers. Those are there. They're very rare. I see them, and we kind of treat them a little bit the way Tom Hanks' character and Paul Edgecombe and the other characters in the book treated Percy in the movie and in the book. Now, one of the plot points that I really loved about it, because we're going to talk about plot points and how they build upon each other here in this story just beautifully. One of the plot points that builds great in this book is not just Percy's bad attitude, but it's also Paul Edgecombe's medical condition. He's got a urinary tract infection. And this comes into play at various points in the book. And just brilliantly. And the way they portray it in the movie is just perfect. Some of the other inmates, of course, that are in the prison are also characters in this book. Like Delacroix, the Frenchman that, he's in the other cell. He's got a pet mouse. A mouse shows up on the block and he makes a pet out of it, Mr. Jingles. Another thing that Stephen King nails, prison. The safest place for little animals and bugs, birds, baby raccoons, cats, mice, just everything in a prison. The inmates will take care of them. If the inmates can turn them into pets, they do. I've seen cats inside of the cell. You wouldn't think, how does this stuff get in to prisons? I mean, they may some of the especially in our old Utah State Prison. In the new prison, pretty rare. It would be pretty hard to get an animal in there. But in the old one, where the way things were set up, I mean, there were some parts of that prison that any type of animal could just wander into where the inmates are. And they, make pets of them and they treat them well. And they don't, that's a realistic thing. At least from my experience. Now, another thing that was realistic is the moment where Paul Edgecombe meets John Coffey for the first time, and they have a little conversation, and then John Coffey reaches his big hand forth to shake the prison guard's hand, to shake Paul Edgecombe's hand, to shake Tom Hanks' hand. And Tom Hanks reluctantly kind of shakes the hand. Now, and in the book, it goes into a little bit more detail of why he's reluctant to do this. It's kind of like an unspoken rule between guards and inmates that you don't shake hands. You can do the fist bump, you can do the, hey, what's up? But the shaking of the hand is really kind of something that does not happen. So that was kind of an interesting moment in the book where I was like, and I'm glad that Stephen King sort of in the book pointed it out, that it was not something that really ever happens. And the guard was taking a risk by doing that. Not in the movie, not so much. I mean, you don't get into Tom Hanks' head in that. But another thing that was great was the different prison projects that are talked about in the book. Like they're doing some remodeling. The politicians are meddling in the way the prison is designed. And there's a passage in the book where the infirmary is just put in the wrong spot. It's just put in the wrong spot. It was in page 24. I marked it down. I wanted to read that because it's so correct. Okay. Whose country bumpkin idea it had been to put an infirmary on the second floor in the first place was just another one of life's mysteries. Oh my God. Even in the new prison that we just built, whose country bumpkin idea was it to do some of the stuff they did out there? And the old prison, the new prison, there's stuff just don't make sense of why it's where it's at. And I was just like, yeah, I lived it, been there, done that. A great addition to the story that Stephen King put in. Now, the Kendrick twins, of course, they are the victims in the story. They are kidnapped from their porch in the book and in the movie, brutalized and murdered and found in the arms of John Coffey. Now, when they come across John Coffey out in the woods with these two deceased children, the words out of his mouth are, "I tried to take it back. I was too late." Now, John Coffey, it's great that Stephen King repeats this line in a lot of different instances in the book. And we see it in the movie too, where he repeats this line over and over and over. And we're kind of left, well, what does that mean? What does that mean? And of course, we find out at the end what it means. Now, just another way of Stephen King layering this stuff. One of the great scenes in the book is the practice run they do, because they need to turn old Sparky on for their next execution. I think the guy's name they're executing is Bitterroot or something like that. But they need to do a practice run on the old execution. Another thing that happens for real. I mean, I've been there when the Utah State Prison has done some executions. I mean, I know what it's like. And they do the practice run, and it's fun. The funniest scene in the book, probably the funniest scene in the movie, if you know what I'm talking about. I'm a done Tom Turkey. I won't say some of the other things that the character says, because in the practice run, because I get demonetized in the video, I'll probably get yeeted right out of YouTube. But anyway, so Paul is Paul Edgecombe, our main character, is of course telling this story as he's sitting in his rest home in the 1990s, where he's watching stupid shows like Jerry Springer and Oprah Winfrey and Sally Jesse Raphael. And he's comparing and contrasting entertainment in the 90s to entertainment back in the 30s when he was young. And he's having a little bit of a nostalgia trip. And I like that little touch of this guy that was a prison guard in the 1930s, living long enough to see the degradation of modern entertainment in the 90s. And if he would have lived another 20 years into today's world, his head would have been spinning. He'd just been like, oh shit, oh my God, the 30s were so much better, so much more innocent. The first half of the book is honestly told more about the prison itself and the guards and the inmates and who lived there than really getting into the John Coffey story itself and the supernatural elements of the book. But that's another great thing I love about this book. It's the setup is so dynamic with these characters. And then you start getting into some of the supernatural things. And of course, then we get to start to get back into Paul Edgecombe's, the main prison guard that we're following. We get to deal with his urinary tract infection again. And we get to see John Coffey sort of surprise the prison guard by grabbing him through the prison bars. And literally with his own powers of supernatural that just have not been evident yet in the book or the movie, for half of it, he heals the prison guard, Paul, of his urinary tract infection. And then Paul's reaction is, when you're in that much pain and then you're not in pain anymore, it's almost like Christmas Day. And I know, I've been in some pain. I just went through a medical issue, and when the pain was gone, I was celebrating. I was dancing a little jig. I wasn't, because I was strapped into a hospital bed. But if I could have, I would have danced a little jig. That's how wonderful it feels when chronic pain disappears. And that's a great thing, because now we find out that John Coffey has some supernatural abilities. And then what is this thing he keeps saying? Is, I tried to take it back, but it was too late. This thing that he keeps repeating. Now, Paul's, so anyway, well, let's go back to the mouse, Mr. Jingles, and Delacroix, the inmate that keeps the mouse. Remember how I told you that inmates, they'll always get a pet. If they can get a pet, they will. And they will hold on to it. But the prison guards usually take it. And it's not safe to have mice and cats and baby raccoons in the prison. It's not. So we end up taking them out and stuff. God, even skunks I've seen. Anyway, so Mr. Jingles, of course, is a friend to Delacroix and plays with Delacroix. And Delacroix keeps him in a little cigar box. And Mr. Jingles is another character in the book. One of the most important characters. And of course, the scene that shocks everybody, and it's only Stephen King can do this. Well, I could probably do it too in my writing, but I like the way Stephen King did it, is there's a scene where the mouse is chasing a spool of thread across the corridor. And of course, our guy Percy Wetmore, the prison guard that's a jerk, who's been a jerk throughout the book, doing jerk things and just being an a-hole to inmates, botching different parts of even though they practice the execution, he purposely botches the executions just for his own thrills. He stomps on Mr. Jingles, and Mr. Jingles mushed flat. And this, of course, is where we get another scene where Coffee, and it's a touching scene, bring tear to my eyes. And this is one of the only Stephen King books that, this and 11/22/63, only two Stephen King book make me cry. Well, Shawshank Redemption a little bit too. But anyway, Coffee asks for the dead mouse. Paul Edgecombe, the prison guard, puts the dead mouse in Coffee's hand. Coffee uses his supernatural powers, brings the mouse back to life. Perfect scene. Amongst this scene, of course, we get Percy Wetmore's reaction to, he didn't just do that. That's not the same mouse. You've got a double mouse. You got two different mice we're using here. Anyway, Percy doesn't quite believe it, but he's humiliated, pisses his pants. One of the things is we've got another death row inmate named Billy the Kid. Well, he calls himself Billy the Kid. He's got a Billy the Kid tattoo, but he's a bad guy. He's trouble. And he spits on the officers, which happens. He spits a moon pie out of his mouth onto one of the officers. Inmates do that. Inmates throw their poop, their pee, their vomit, they spit. It just happens in parts of the prison. And you never know when it's coming. It sucks if it happens to you. It happened to me once. I did not like it. Now, Percy sabotages some of the executions. He's just a jerk. And then this Billy the Kid reaches through and gets his hands on. Anyway, it turns into these scenes in this book is magnificent. Let's just talk about the ending, because I've kind of gotten through everything but the ending. They want to smuggle John Coffey out of the prison. These prison guards are like, we got to smuggle this guy out of the prison because the warden's wife has got a problem. She's got a medical ailment. We know he can heal urinary tract infections. We know he can heal dead mice. And so they smuggle him out. He goes and heals the warden. They get him back in. Now it's Coffey's turn for the death row. And this is where things get really touchy-feely and cryy and weepy. And this is where I was like, because then we find out that Percy, Percy, the bad prison guard, shoots one of the inmates that's sleeping in the back. I mean, to smuggle Coffey out, they have to put Percy in a straitjacket. They have to drug one of the other inmates so he doesn't see. Billy the Kid they have to drug. Anyway, Percy ends up, just going haywire, shoots one of the inmates 6 times in the back. That's the end of Percy. And then they got to put John Coffey he's got to serve his sentence. He's got to go to death row. They got to put him on old Sparky. And this is where things where all the plot threads come together, where we understand why John Coffey and the prison guards think he's innocent. They've been thinking he's innocent for some time, that he did not kill these 2 young women, 2 young girls. And of course, we find this out, that the Billy the Kid character really was the murderer. Of course, the Billy the Kid character met his own demise in the story, so that's taken care of. And then the John Coffey character, sadly, does not survive the story, which is great, touching. And we find out that the John Coffey character actually found the girls in the woods, and he was trying to use his supernatural power to heal those little girls. And of course, when they found him with the bodies, and he's just repeating, I tried to take it back, but I was too late. I tried to take it back, but it was too late. Of course, this is when everybody cries in the book, when everybody cries in the movie. And then, that's the John Coffey story. Then we get one more sad little scene. Happy little scene, but sad little scene, because Mr. Jingles Mr. Jingles also grows to be an old mouse, and he is in the rest home with Paul Edgecombe. As Paul Edgecombe is recounting this story from the 1990s, things that happened to him in the 1932, Mr. Jingles is still there. He apparently went off to Mouseville and was in the mouse circus, as Delacroix was told that would happen, so Delacroix would, not feel bad that Mr. Jingles had... Anyway, just a great, great book. Great book. Movie just as good. And that is my discussion on The Green Mile. Thank you very much.